Celine's house still smelled like cinnamon and control. I hadn't stepped through her front door in months, not since the funeral, and even then, I barely stayed long enough to nod through the condolences. Tonight, though, was different. It was supposed to be a casual family gathering, nothing heavy, just dinner, wine, and more silence than conversation. The room looked warm on the surface. Yellow-toned lights, soft jazz humming from a speaker in the corner, plates already laid out with matching napkins, except one. Mine. No place card. No plate. No chair pulled out. I stood for a second too long, trying not to look like I noticed. Celine noticed, though. She came over, gave me that sugar-slick smile she always used when lying, and chirped, "Oh, I thought you weren't coming. But you look rested." Mom didn't even get up, just waved from her seat like she was hailing a cab. The sound of Hollis laughing from the kitchen made something tighten in my gut. Used to be, back when Dad was alive, these nights felt different. There were burgers on the grill and bad jokes on repeat. Nobody tried to outshine anyone. Nobody plotted. Now it all felt staged. And I felt like an extra in a story they'd rewritten without telling me. I wasn't always this quiet, you know. I used to talk too much, cry too easy. But after enough slammed doors and we didn't think you'd want to be involved, I stopped raising my hand to belong. I built my house by skipping every happy hour, by cleaning teeth in the day and wedding halls at night. No down payment gift, no congratulations card, just me and an FHA loan. I never told them. About the house, about anything, really. Only Dad knew. He said it suited me. The wraparound porch, the old oak in the front yard, said I'd finally have a place where nobody talked over me. He died a month after closing, and they never even asked what I'd been up to. The porch light flickered behind me as I stepped out to the backyard. I needed air, or space. Same thing in that house. That's when I heard it. Their voices came soft through the slightly open window. Celine's was low, firm. Hollis laughed. Then the whisper hit me like a fist in the spine. Poison her drink. The house will be ours. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. It had to be a joke. Some sick joke, right? But my name wasn't in that sentence, just her. The kind of word you use when someone's already been reduced to an obstacle. They knew. About the house. About me. I stepped back into the house without saying a word. Smiled when someone offered me a glass of red. Let my hand shake for just a moment before I steadied it against the stem. Dinner moved forward like it always did, with Celine holding court and Mom nodding like a bobblehead. I laughed when they laughed. Said, when they did. Pretended not to notice how Celine kept glancing at me. Was she watching to see if I'd drink it, or waiting for me to drop? I looked down at my glass, red, full, untrustworthy. How did they find out? I asked myself silently. Did Dad say something? Did the paperwork get mailed to the house? And then, does Mom know? My heart beat louder than the clinks of silverware. I wasn't afraid. Not exactly. I was aware. That's worse sometimes. Fear is a reaction. Awareness is knowing it's too late to react. I stood up after dessert, took my glass with me to the kitchen, placed it on the counter beside the open wine bottle. 2 glasses were already there. Of course there were. Celine walked in, casual as a breeze, picked up one of the glasses. Want a top off? She asked, already pouring. I took the other glass, smiled. The memory of her whisper wrapped itself around my throat. But I didn't say anything. I watched her hands, watched her sip. Then I lifted my glass. If they were going to play quiet games, I could play quieter. I drank. I sat back down at the table like I hadn't just overheard my sister planning my slow exit. My heart was still pushing against my chest, like it wanted to leap out and make a scene. But my face? Steady. Like it had been trained for this kind of dinner. The kind where you wear smiles like bulletproof vests. They kept talking. Prices going up. Interest rates down. Who got promoted? Who got pregnant? I didn't hear much of it. I was studying them. Watching Celine's hands, her posture, Hollis's eyes, the way they scanned the table like he owned it. Celine raised her glass. To family, she said with that soft, slow smile people use when they're trying to disarm you. To family, I echoed, but quieter. We clinked glasses. Hers touched mine with a soft sound. I barely sipped, just enough to look like I was still one of them. Meanwhile, I waited. Watched to see if Celine would avoid hers. She didn't. Eventually, she drank. Earlier that day, when I got to the house, I did something I'd never done before. I installed a tiny camera, hidden above the kitchen cabinet, nestled behind a decorative mug no one ever moved, just in case. Just in case all the weird feelings weren't just in my head. Nobody noticed. Celine had her hands full with appetizers and compliments. Hollis was too busy bragging about a golf trip. Mom didn't notice anything unless it was already broken. Trust doesn't vanish. It erodes, slowly, quietly, until one day you realize you've stopped asking questions and started planning exits. I thought back to that whisper. Poison her drink. It sounded absurd now, sitting here watching her laugh with her husband, both of them sipping like nothing happened. Still, I saw her hesitate before lifting her glass. Just a second too long. Not fear. Calculation. She drank eventually, but I'd already seen it, and so had the camera. The tension never left me. Even as I nodded along with the conversation, even as I let my fork scrape the plate just right so I didn't draw attention, the real conversation was under the table. Between eye twitches and fork pauses, Celine made a joke about how some people just prefer the loner lifestyle, looking right at me. Hollis chimed in with something about how real estate is all about timing and connections. Mom chuckled and said, "Your sister just knows how to make things happen. You've always been more creative." That one landed hard, not because it was new, but because it was so casual. And no one flinched. That's what stung. I remembered what Dad used to say when someone asked too much from him at church or volunteered him for something he never agreed to. The ones who smile the most at dinner are often the hungriest for what isn't theirs. After dinner, I took my plate to the sink. Celine followed, of course. "You've been quiet," she said, opening a drawer and pulling out a fresh tea towel like this was her kitchen. "Everything okay?" "I'm good," I said. "You know, if the house stuff is too much, taxes, upkeep, I'd be happy to help. It's a big responsibility." I looked at her, deadpan. "I'm quite capable, but I appreciate the condescension." She smiled, leaned on the counter. "That's not what I meant. You know family should share everything, right?" She placed her hand on my shoulder. That move wasn't for comfort. It was dominance, wrapped in silk. I looked at her hand, then her eyes, and said nothing. I left the house 20 minutes later. Didn't say goodbye. Just grabbed my coat from the hook by the door and stepped into the cool night. Once in the car, I took out my phone and pulled up the live feed from the kitchen camera. There it was, her, holding both glasses. I paused it, took a screenshot, and uploaded it to my backup drive. Then another drive. Then one more, labeled Legacy. Tonight wasn't dinner, it was surveillance. They thought I wouldn't see it coming. They were right. But that doesn't mean I won't make sure they see what comes next. I don't scream in a fight. I study. I wait. And I strike when they think I've already disappeared. The next morning came with a chill that felt sharper than the forecast warned. The kind of cold that didn't ask permission before crawling under your skin. I pulled my coat tighter as I stepped into the community hall where they were holding a remembrance for Dad. Celine had organized it. Of course she had. And like everything she touched, it was polished to the point of sterility. There were candles on every table. A looped slideshow playing in the background. Photos of Dad fishing, Dad fixing shelves, Dad smiling with Celine. Never with me. My chair had a name tag, sure, but it was handwritten on a blank sticker. Hers was embossed, pre-printed. I picked up the program. Celine Merrick Varner, beloved daughter. I flipped through it again. Once more, nowhere was my name, not even a line like also survived by. Nothing, as if I hadn't even come from the same man. A woman 2 rows back leaned toward the man beside her and asked, not even bothering to whisper, "Is she one of the cousins?" I sat through the service with my hands folded so tightly they ached. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. That kind of pain doesn't come in loud sobs. It creeps in slowly, like water seeping through drywall until the whole structure rots. It doesn't shout. It just stays. I stood when they unveiled the new plaque near the front table. "In loving memory of Astor Merrick," it read. Below that, Celine and Hollis's names etched in brass, listed as legacy caretakers. Mine wasn't there. I leaned in, just to make sure. Nothing. Someone behind me muttered, "I thought he had 2 daughters." Celine stepped in quickly, resting her hand on the edge of the table, smiling like this was all part of the plan. "We kept it simple," she said. "It's more about Dad's direct legacy." Direct legacy? I didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. They weren't just cutting me out of the picture, they were redrawing it, redefining it. I wasn't an omission, I was a deletion. Mom waited until the crowd thinned out. Then, quietly, she slid up beside me, holding a folder. Cream-colored, tied with a soft ribbon like it was a wedding invitation. "I need you to sign this," she said. "It's just easier this way. You're not really involved with the estate anyway, and Soline's got the time to manage things. You wouldn't have to worry about taxes or maintenance or anything, really." I took it in my hands, nodded like I was listening, but I was already flipping the pages. It wasn't temporary. It was a full ownership transfer. Quiet, legal, permanent. I closed it gently and slipped it into my purse. When someone offers you poison in a silver cup, I thought, you don't toss it, you toast with it. I told her I'd look it over. I smiled, she smiled back. And just like that, I became the polite, cooperative daughter again. The one who never made waves. Later that afternoon, I met Lynette at a small cafe off Jefferson Street. We sat outside, even though the wind had a bite to it. I needed the space around me. I pulled the folder out, slid it across the table, told her everything. She read the documents in silence, then shook her head once. Not surprised, just disappointed in how unsurprising it all was. "Oregon's got some shady real estate loopholes," she said. "You sign that thing, even under pressure, and it's done. Gone. They don't even need your signature if they push the right channels." I didn't say much. My coffee had gone cold. "Family doesn't always stab you in the back," she added. "Sometimes they ask you to sign your own knife." That night, back home, I laid the folder out on the kitchen table. I pulled out Dad's original deed. His scrawl was there. The date. My name. Then I opened a new document. Blank. No header. No seal. I wrote out a decoy agreement. Signed it myself. Photocopied it. Then mailed it to myself. Certified. I'd keep it on record. A placeholder in case this game got worse before it got better. I started a new digital folder on my hard drive. Truth. In case they win. Inside, I dropped in scans of everything. The fake transfer, the program with my name missing, the plaque photo, the recording of the woman calling me a cousin, each item a piece of the history they tried to edit. They wanted silence. I'd give them something quieter. Proof. I wasn't just being erased. I was being replaced. And they'd already written the script. 3 days after the memorial, I showed up to Mom's house like she asked. She'd left a voicemail that said, "Let's put things behind us. Sunday dinner, just us." The words sounded soft, maybe even sincere, but I've been wrong about her tone before. The moment I walked in, I saw it. A cake on the table, decorated with looping pink letters. "Happy birthday, Soline." The kitchen smelled like vanilla and icing, just like it used to when Dad baked box cakes for us as kids. Only this time, there was no us. I stood there for a second, waiting to see if someone would glance up, realize what they'd missed. My birthday was the same day as hers. Always had been. Soline smiled across the room, fork in hand. "Well, you never liked parties, right?" A neighbor I didn't know leaned in and whispered, "Is it your birthday too?" I didn't even blink. "It used to be," I said, then turned and walked toward the sink to wash my hands. Nobody stopped me. Dinner was already in motion. The big table was full, plates set, napkins folded, names scribbled in cursive on little tent cards. I scanned them all. Not one for me. Mom waved me off. "Oh, just grab a chair, sweetheart. You know, we're all family here." I found one near the kids' table. Folded legs, low back, cushions too thin. The table had plastic forks, paper napkins. Someone had spilled grape juice, and no one had cleaned it. A 5-year-old with spaghetti sauce on his face looked up and asked, "Are you the babysitter?" I sat down anyway. My plate came empty. Everyone else's was full. They kept talking over me like I wasn't there. Like I hadn't been part of that house, that life, that history. I chewed quietly, letting their voices pass over my head like static. When they push you to the margins long enough, you start to wonder if you ever actually belonged to the center, or if you'd imagined it. Later, Soline stood to give a toast. Of course she did. She talked about resilience. About holding the family together after Dad passed. About Hollis working hard to maintain Dad's vision. about Mom's quiet strength, about the kids being the next generation we're building for. She didn't mention me. Hollis winked at her and raised his glass. I nodded once. I didn't smile. Just watched. They don't have to say it. I've heard it loud enough in their silence. I told Mom I had work in the morning, which wasn't true, but it got me out of there. I grabbed my coat, slipped through the back gate, and started walking. It was cold again. Not winter cold, just the kind that reminded you were alone. Dad's old truck was still parked under the oak tree across the street. Tires flat, windows fogged. No one had touched it since the day after his funeral, like a ghost that no one dared look in the eye. I walked past it slow. There was a birthday, years ago, I was maybe 9, when he carved a wooden nameplate for my bedroom door. My name, curved and sanded smooth. He gave Soline a bracelet that year. She rolled her eyes at it, said it was too plain. I had that nameplate for 2 decades before it broke in a movie. I still think about the smell of the wood. When someone's been absent long enough, you start inventing reasons to not feel the wound anymore. Halfway down the street, I saw a pine cone resting in the gutter. Not special, just there. I picked it up, put it in my coat pocket. Something real. Something grounded. By the time I got home, it was dark. I hung my keys on the hook, kicked off my shoes, and walked to the shelf where I kept Dad's letter. The one Lynette gave me. I placed the pine cone beside it. Then I opened my laptop. Opened the archive folder. New entry. Erasure by silence. I uploaded 3 photos. One of the cake, one of the seat I was given, one of the empty chair at the adult table. Last, I wrote a note to myself in bold, right at the top. Next time they try to seat me in the corner, I'll bring my own damn chair. And when I saw what they did with the will, I realized they weren't just forgetting me, they were replacing me. The county office smelled like old toner and microwaved sadness. I stood in line under flickering fluorescence, holding a number in one hand and my dad's original will in the other. My fingers clenched it so tight the paper was warm by the time I got called up. "Hi," I said, as flat as I could manage. "I need a copy of the most recent will filed under Astor Merrick." The woman behind the counter looked up at me, blinked twice like she wasn't expecting me to speak clearly, then tapped her keyboard. A few minutes later, she walked into the back and returned with a manila folder. She laid it in front of me without a word. I opened it, read the first page, then the second. My name wasn't there. Not as beneficiary, not as co-owner, not as anything. Soline was listed as sole executor, sole inheritor, sole everything. The clerk's eyes flicked up from her monitor. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't have to. I closed the folder slowly, keeping my hands from shaking by locking them together beneath the counter. They hadn't just edited me out. They'd redrafted the whole thing like I was never real. I asked for a printed copy. She hesitated, then hit print. This is their final draft of me, I told myself, and I walked out without a word. Back at the house, I didn't go inside right away. I walked the perimeter, touched the porch post Dad carved himself. The knots in the wood felt familiar, even under chipped paint. I ran my palm down the beam like I was looking for a heartbeat. There was a summer we painted the fence together. I'd gotten blue on my sneakers and cried. He told me, "A good mess means you gave it your all." Then we kept painting. The house remembered me, even if they didn't. Inside, I laid the altered will beside the original mortgage deed. My name was still there. In ink. In his handwriting. I placed both documents side by side on the kitchen table. "They rewrote a document," I whispered, "but they can't rewrite the hours I spent laying tile with him." The knock came later than expected. Lynette stood on my porch with a worn cardboard box tucked under one arm. Her face told me it wasn't something casual. "I found this in Mom's attic," she said. "She must have forgotten it was even there. It has your name on it." Inside the box was a sealed envelope. My father's handwriting, sharp, deliberate. My name written across the front. I sat on the couch and opened it while Lynette stayed quiet, arms crossed like she was holding herself in place. It was a letter. No date, just his voice, in ink. He said he was sorry for letting Soline take the spotlight when she didn't earn it, for trusting Mom to handle things fairly. He wrote that he left the house to me not just out of fairness, but because I was the one who stayed, the one who didn't ask for anything, but gave everything. "You understood what this home means," he wrote. "That's why I left it to you. It's yours. Always was. I didn't cry. Not right then. I just folded the letter, placed it in the middle of the table, and stared at it like it was breathing. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Legacy, unedited. I scanned the letter, saved 3 copies, local, external, cloud. Then I took photos of the living room, the kitchen, the porch, the baseboards I sanded down myself, the brass handle Dad replaced in 2004, the tile we laid, every nail, every dent. Then I made a list. Will, altered, birthday, erased, name, missing from plaque, chair, not set at the table, deed, replaced. If they want a version of history where I don't exist, I typed, they're going to have to delete the truth first. Before bed, I took the letter and walked to the cemetery. It was quiet, no wind, just me and a headstone that still hadn't been updated with his final date. I read the letter out loud, just once. Then folded it carefully, placed it back in my coat pocket. No tears, just steel. You trusted me with this, I said quietly. I won't let your trust be overwritten. But as I'd soon find out, trust wasn't the only thing they'd stolen in my name. The call came mid-afternoon while I was sorting paperwork for my insurance renewal. I let it ring once, twice, before answering with that flat voice people use when they don't expect good news. This is Thane. Hi, Ms. Merrick. This is Lana from Columbia Credit Union. We're calling regarding the past due balance on your co-signed loan with us. I blinked. I didn't co-sign any loan. There was a pause on the other end. You're listed as the co-applicant for a personal loan opened last August. $40,000. Last payment was missed 2 months ago. My breath stuttered. Not from surprise, just the quiet confirmation of a suspicion I didn't want validated. I'd like to see the paperwork, I said. Email it. Now. A few minutes later, it hit my inbox. I opened the PDF. There it was, my name, my information, a signature that looked like mine, but wasn't mine. They didn't just steal my name, I muttered. They used it as collateral. I didn't slam the laptop. I didn't scream, I just stared at the screen until the shape of my own name felt foreign. Next morning, I walked into the bank like I was there to deposit a check. The lobby was warm, too quiet. I walked up to the desk and asked for the loan officer listed on the email. A tall man with wireframe glasses came out, smiled like he knew this wouldn't go well for me. You're Thane Merrick? He asked. Yes. Ah, your sister told us you were hard to reach, but she mentioned you agreed over the phone. Something about not being available to come in but trusting her judgment? I didn't correct him. Not yet. Print me everything, I said. He hesitated, then left to get the file. When he came back, I asked for copies, notarized. He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. As I waited for the copies, I remembered what Dad used to say when folks poked at him the wrong way at church. Don't get loud. Loud makes you look guilty. Smile like it's your last day on earth and let them walk into their own mess. So I smiled. They expect me to blow up, I thought. I won't. I'll build the fire quietly. That evening, I parked in front of Mom's house. She opened the door with a confused smile, like she hadn't seen me in years, though it had only been a week. I didn't sit. I stood in the foyer and held out the envelope. Did you know my name is on this loan? She looked at the papers, blinked hard, then pulled them closer like squinting would change the words. Sweetheart, it was just temporary. Solene needed help, and well, you're always so distant. You could have asked. Well, she said, suddenly sounding wounded. You don't exactly make it easy. I didn't argue. I just laid the papers on the hallway table and turned to go. You didn't ask, I said. You assumed I'd stay silent like always. Back at the house, I dropped my keys on the counter and walked straight to the kitchen. I sat down and stared at nothing. For a moment, I hovered over the folder on my desktop. Legacy, unedited. I almost deleted it. What was the point? They had the will, the trust, the family, the lawyers. Now my name on a loan. But then I looked to the side. Dad's letter still sat on the table where I'd left it. I opened it again. Reread that line. You were never invisible to me. And just like that, the fog cleared. This wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about the house. It was about reclaiming every inch of space they'd taken from me without asking. The next day, I met Lynette at her office. She'd already called a friend, Miriam, an attorney who specialized in estate fraud. Miriam didn't smile much, just listened, read through the documents, and started highlighting things. "If you wait too long," she said, "they'll have legal grounds to freeze your assets. You'll be liable for that loan." So I started the paper trail. Not just to defend myself, but to draw a boundary in ink. This isn't about the house anymore. It's about every time they used my silence as consent. And just when I thought I was ready, their next move reminded me I was still playing catch-up. The text came in at 7:03 a.m. I hadn't even made it to the kitchen yet, still half under the covers, groggy, checking my phone like it was any other morning. It was from Soline. "She'll be out soon. Everything's almost ours." At first, my brain didn't connect the pieces. The emoji made it worse, casual cruelty in digital form. Then it hit. She meant to send it to Hollis. She sent it to me. I sat up, phone clutched in both hands. My breath was steady, but my stomach was a pit. They didn't just make a mistake. They made their plan my proof. I didn't reply, didn't forward it. I just sat there, thumb hovering over the screen, eyes locked on her words. "She'll be out soon." I wasn't reading a sentence anymore. I was looking at a forecast. I was a storm they thought they'd already outrun. I opened my laptop, plugged in the external hard drive, and took a screenshot. Then 2 more. I created a new folder inside Legacy, unedited, and named it In Their Own Words. Inside the folder, I dropped the screenshots and a PDF where I typed out everything I remembered from dinner, from the safe, from the cake. I added timestamps, context, anything that would matter if I ever needed to explain it in a courtroom, or worse. My hands didn't shake. Not this time. I wasn't spiraling. I was drafting. I thought about sending it to Delaney right then, but paused. If I acted too soon, they'd know I was awake. Let them think I was still behind, still that quiet girl in the corner of the room. Let them keep underestimating me. This was the last piece I needed. I'd been playing defense. It was time to change sides. 2 hours later, Delaney called. Her tone was clipped, direct. "I just got off the phone with the county clerk," she said. Someone submitted an unsigned will, trying to trigger a title transfer again. My silence must have lasted too long, because she added, "They're escalating. They think you won't fight." "They're wrong," I said. She told me she'd prepare a notice of legal dispute and file it immediately to freeze any further action. Asked if I had more evidence. "I have everything," I replied. And I did. After the call, I drove to the clinic and worked a short shift. Just 2 patients, both elderly, both chatty. I smiled, cleaned teeth, nodded along to stories about grandkids and retirement hobbies. At lunch, I sat in the break room alone. Someone had hung a new poster. "You don't owe anyone silence." I stared at it longer than I meant to. My mind slipped back to 5th grade. Soline and I had built a science fair model together. I did most of the work. She took it to school, added her name only, and won 1st place. When I told Mom, she said, "It's just a project. Be the bigger person." That line had followed me through decades. She's always been rewriting reality, I thought. I just stopped letting her do it with my name on the paper. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about authorship. Who gets to write my story? That night, I stayed up organizing. I built a timeline in a spreadsheet. Events, photos, quotes, PDFs, messages. Each line a matchstick. I was stacking kindling. At the top of the document, I typed, "My silence was never agreement. It was endurance." And then I hit send, emailing it all to Delaney, Lynette, and myself. I exhaled. Not in relief, in readiness. But nothing could have prepared me for what they tried next. Not even this. I arrived early. 15 minutes before the community center's parking lot started filling up. Enough time to breathe. Enough time to walk the perimeter twice and remind myself why I was doing this. The event was branded as a celebration. Dad's years of volunteer work, the scholarship fund Soline started in his name, the polished slideshow already looping across 2 mounted screens. Soline stood near the front doors, talking with the coordinator like she owned the building. Maybe was already seated front and center, her hands folded perfectly on her lap like this was Sunday service. I picked up the printed program. My name wasn't in it, not as a speaker, not even a mention in the acknowledgments. But there was a 2-paragraph bio for Soline. Dedicated daughter, keeper of her father's legacy. Hollis passed behind me, leaned in, said under his breath, "Don't worry, Thane. We've got everything under control. Estate matters are smoothing out." He smiled. Smiled like he meant it, like this was just a little family business being tied up with a bow. I turned toward the back row and caught Lynette's eye. She nodded, slipped a flash drive into my hand, then blended back into the crowd. They're not ready, I thought. Not for what I came here to return. Halfway through the event, just as Soline was preparing to close it out, a man in a navy vest stepped up to the podium. "We have time for one more speaker," he said. "Thane Merrick, would you like to say a few words?" Soline's head snapped toward him. I smiled. Yes, I would. I walked calmly to the podium, set my folder down, and took the mic. "Thank you all for coming. I know many of you knew my father in ways I never could. Through his kindness, his help, his advice." I paused, then pulled the sealed envelope from my folder and held it up. Before my father passed, he left me 3 things: a house, a letter, and the truth. I didn't look at Soline. I looked at Maybe. Then Hollis, then the rest of them. I opened the letter and read, "You were the only one who understood what this home means." The room fell into that kind of quiet where even breathing feels loud. I stepped down from the podium, handed the USB to the tech assistant, and nodded toward the screen. The video rolled. No sound. Just a clear shot of Soline inside my home, digging through drawers, opening cabinets. Then the shot shifted. Hollis in my kitchen, holding 2 wine glasses, one in each hand. The swap. The smile. Gasps. One woman whispered, "Is that even legal?" Soline shot to her feet. "This is out of context." I stepped forward, microphone still in hand. "So is every version of the truth you've ever told." Then came the next clip. A dimly lit hallway, the camera inside my office. Soline opening the old safe, no hesitation. Inside, documents, photos, the framed deed in her hand. She looked around like she knew she shouldn't be there. Because she didn't belong there. I spoke as it played. This is how legacy becomes theft. This is how stories get rewritten while the ink is still wet. Maybe stood, her voice a whisper not meant to carry. "You told me she gave you permission." The crowd shifted, the atmosphere souring around them. Hollis stopped smiling. Soline looked down. No script could fix this. I took a breath, turned to the event coordinator. "I've made extra copies of the letter and legal records. You're welcome to add them to the archive if you feel they belong." I turned back to the crowd. "This isn't about revenge, it's about remembering correctly." I looked at Maybe one last time. "I never wanted your approval, just your honesty." And with that, I left. No applause, no music, just footsteps and whispers and silence. And this time, the silence felt like justice. A week had passed since the event at the community center. You'd think I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, but what I felt most was stillness. Not the kind that comes after a storm, the kind that tells you the storm might circle back. The calls stopped. No more vague threats. No follow-ups from Soline. Hollis vanished off social media, which was the loudest thing he'd done in years. Maybe didn't reach out. And strangely, I didn't expect her to. The papers wanted interviews. I declined. If they were looking for a scandal, they'd need to look elsewhere. This wasn't about spotlight. It was about record. Sometimes you don't need closure from others. You just need the silence to stop hurting. The potluck was hosted by Mrs. Carlin, my dad's old friend from Rotary. She still wore her Sunday pearls and still made lemonade that could peel paint. I hadn't planned to speak much, just show my face and prove I still belonged to the neighborhood he'd helped build. About an hour in, a woman I'd never met tapped me on the shoulder and smiled politely. "Excuse me," she said, looking around. "Are you the housekeeper here?" It didn't sting. Not like it would've. I looked her in the eye, steady. "No. I live here." She flushed, mumbled something, and backed away. I didn't chase her down to explain. Even after all that, someone still thought I didn't belong. But this time, it didn't cut. It clarified. I drove home with the windows down. The air wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It just felt clean. That night, I took the frame out of the linen closet. It was wrapped in newspaper from 2018. I unwrapped it slowly, revealing the photo of Dad and me sitting on the porch, his arm around my shoulder, both of us mid-laugh. The last photo we ever took together. I hung it in the living room, right above the mantel, right where Soline once hung that staged family portrait without me in it. And just beneath the frame, I tacked up the embroidered handkerchief he'd given me, TMH, stitched in fading blue thread, my echo anchor, not because I needed to prove anything, because it was mine. Maybe came by 3 days later. No call, just knocked once and stood there with that same expression she always wore when she didn't want to be the one in the wrong, but didn't want to admit it either. We sat outside. She didn't say much at first. "You embarrassed your sister," she finally said. "She may never forgive you." "Forgiveness only matters when someone asks for it," I said. She tried to explain, something about Soline feeling overwhelmed, about not meaning to push me out. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. When she finished, I walked her to the gate. Didn't hug her. Didn't slam the door. Just walked. Back inside, I opened a new file on my laptop. Titled it, Unedited, A Daughter's Inheritance. I started writing. Not to get even. Not to vent. To make sure no one could ever rewrite this again. I listed memories, legal records, audio clips, journal entries, letters, names, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. He built this house, I rebuilt its meaning, and somewhere in the silence I heard my father say, "Well done."